We are going to be looking at some disturbing videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. So I happened to be browsing some older videos and I came across this one video again. This took place exactly 1 year after 9/11. This was a memorial at Ground Zero. Just go ahead and take a look at this video footage. Why am I showing you this 20-plus-year-old video clip? That is because this video clip is even more relevant today than ever before. They were showing you on national TV 1 year after 9/11 this memorial, their calling card, the all-seeing eye. So all these events that are currently taking place, like what's happening in Los Angeles, these events to sow chaos, they are all by design. What is currently happening in Los Angeles was always meant to happen no matter who was president, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, because they are testing something. And I'm going to go ahead and get into that a little bit later on in this video. But one of the key words I am seeing by news and media, if you go through these news articles here, one of the key words happens to be chaos. For example, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these news articles. Protesters or agitators? Who is driving chaos at LA immigration protest? Trump's political brand is chaos. Some observers fault feds for chaos in LA County. Chaos erupts in the LA area following increased activity across the country by ICE. Trump's chaos campaign in Los Angeles. Chaos, chaos, chaos. And of course, chaos is a great way to describe what is currently happening in Los Angeles. I go ahead and type in Trump into Google, and what is the second thing that appears? The second thing that appears is Trump, a great chaos. The word of the day, or perhaps the word of the year, will be chaos. So what am I getting to? Well, they always have to show us ahead of time their plans, and one of the ways they do it is through a magazine called The Economist. The Economist I have featured a couple times, or quite a few times on this channel, thanks to these magazine covers, the 2024 World Ahead and the 2025 World Ahead, because these magazine covers always seem to quote-unquote predict future events. Well, isn't it just interesting that 2 months ago, back on April 12th of 2025, The Economist would once again release a magazine cover, this magazine cover right here, which shows Donald Trump's face, but you can see the words, "The Age of Chaos." It definitely seems like those who own and operate The Economist really do know a lot. But let's go ahead and go back to their 2025 World Ahead magazine cover, because I want to go ahead and take a look at Saturn at the top. So back in 2024, musicians, they kept singing and referring to Saturn, Saturn's return. For example, reading this article here from Nylon.com, from Ariana to SZA, why everyone's singing about Saturn's return right now. So basically, a Saturn return is seen as a time of reckoning, a call to step up and take responsibility for your life, basically chaos. Take a shot for every time I say chaos in this video. You'll probably be drunk by the time you're halfway through. But anyway, in 2024, we had all these musicians singing about Saturn, Saturn return, chaos. And I find this article right here to also be interesting, and this is coming around the same time of the Economist magazine cover. This was published on April 15th, 2025 by Teen Vogue, and remember, the Economist article about the Age of Chaos came out on April 12th of 2025. Gen Z's first Saturn return means chaos. How to cope. The article goes on to say the first cohort of this generation is about to experience their Saturn return. Approximately every 27 to 29.5 years, we experience a Saturn return. When the planet Saturn returns to the exact sign and degree it was at the time of our birth. When this happens, we can expect a lot of tumult in our lives. Think of breakups or new relationships, losing jobs or gaining new ones, uprooting your life and moving, basically anything that throws your life into a little bit of chaos. The article goes on to say how Saturn return will impact Gen Z. Saturn is in Pisces from March 7th, 2023 to May 24th, 2025, and then again from September 1st, 2025 to February 13th, 2026. That means Gen Zers born in the late 90s are being targeted now. Very weird, isn't it? When life gets wild, it's normal to feel like you're losing control. During your Saturn return, you just have to embrace the chaos. This gets even better. Listen to this, and it'll instantly make you think of what's currently going on in Los Angeles. What makes their Saturn return so auspicious is that Saturn and Neptune unite on February 20th, 2026 for the first time, and I would mark that date down your calendar, for the first time in our lifetime, offering those experiencing this affirming cosmic event a fresh start and a new beginning. This will be the first generation to fight for their dreams and attain them. In the process, they'll augment the world. What does this mean for Gen Z? The Gen Zs experiencing their Saturn return from now until the end of February 2026 will revolutionize society. Do a little magic, play within the shadows. You see how this world is run by ritualists? And this stuff, Saturn's return, was all in the music. It was playing throughout the airways from 2024 up to now. So going back to the 2025 Economist magazine cover, what we're shown here now makes a lot of sense. They are showing us Saturn's return. Basically, they are showing us chaos. Chaos sits on top of everything in 2025. Chaos is the crown. Going back to this Teen Vogue magazine, again, they are telling us how Gen Z will be experiencing their first Saturn's return, and it'll be chaos. And I just wonder how many people who are Gen Z are out there during the Los Angeles riots. I am assuming a good majority of them out there are Gen Z. Talking about Gen Z, this gets a little bit more interesting when connecting the dots. Generation Z, they are born between 1997 and 2012, making them between the ages of 12 and 27 years old, meaning that most of the people who are considered to be Gen Z are of war age. Back when Biden was president, there were a ton of different articles that came out that referred to Gen Z. For instance, this article right here, which I'm reading from the New York Post, which was published on January 27th, 2024. Biden admin border policy puts U.S. in imminent danger with military-age migrant invasion, former FBI officials. So there was a time where we saw nothing but young men who are in their 20s, again, Gen Z lined up at the border coming into the United States. No children, no women, just young military-age men. Continue to read this article. It goes on to say, in its modern history, the U.S. has never suffered an invasion of the homeland, and yet one is unfolding now, according to the officials, which included former Terrorist Screening Center Director Timothy Healy, FBI Assistant Directors Kevin Brock and Chris Swecker, and Mark Morgan, the former Acting Commissioner, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, who's also an ex-FBI superintendent. They were quoted as saying, military-age men from across the globe, many from countries or regions not friendly to the United States, are landing in waves on our soil by the thousands, not by splashing ashore from a ship or parachuting from a plane, but rather by foot across a border that has been accurately advertised around the world as largely unprotected and with ready access granted, the letter continued. So don't you see, it's all by design. These people, they were all let in back in 2024 and beyond, these war age Gen Zs, these war age men, and now in 2025, these Gen Zs, now is their time of chaos. The so-called powers that be, they are very evil. They are disgusting. I can't even call them people. They were having their controlled puppets, their musicians, sing about it back in 2024. Their news agencies, their news and media, they were telling us this ahead of time. What's currently going on in Los Angeles is not solely about ICE. It's about the destruction of the United States from within. So they can go ahead and build back better. So they can go ahead and rebuild. What comes after chaos? What comes after chaos is order. Order out of chaos. That is basically the definition of Saturn's return. Order out of chaos. You have all this chaos in your life, Saturn returns, and now is time to bring order. But talking about testing, these riots in Los Angeles is not all about bringing down the United States. It's also about gathering information, collecting information. It's also testing Palantir's technology. They want to analyze and build profiles and use AI on people who riot, speak up, cause, again, chaos, dissent, and so forth. And right now, Los Angeles is the perfect testing ground. And this makes a lot more sense after learning what Glamham had discovered.
Well, what do we have here flying around LA County? Side note, the city of Los Angeles is having a little bit of unrest right now, protests and whatnot, I'm sure you've heard. So, you're seeing the flight data from Flight Radar 24. These loops and grids are typical of aerial surveillance, reconnaissance, or mapping operations. Civilian aircraft almost never fly this way, and if you were transporting something, this would be very inefficient. This is the aircraft, and it's a military variant of the Beechcraft King Air, and this version has been linked historically to Project Guardrail, used for electronic intelligence gathering. AI's description says the plane's associated with electronic battlefield surveillance over Burbank. How does one define battlefield? This flight pattern is consistent with wide area camera surveillance, radar scanning, cell signal interception, LiDAR mapping, so surveillance is likely. Just a guess. The aircraft has no visible registration or metadata, which is a clue of government, military, or intelligence operations. The reality is we're in an era where airspace is more than a way for people to go on holiday. Do you think it's about arresting you, or is it about predicting you? Think on that. I'll see you in the comments. Take care.
I happen to have learned something crazy about Palantir, that over 1 billion of us may have been testing for the funders of Palantir, or one of the funders anyway. One of those funders was In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm. So it's no surprise that the CIA funds Palantir. But what also happens to be pretty interesting is the fact that In-Q-Tel had also funded Keyhole Inc. Keyhole Inc., the founder was John Hanke. So John Hanke was being funded by the CIA, but John Hanke was also the creator of a game called Pokemon Go. See right here, John Hanke is the creator of Pokemon Go. He is the founder and CEO of Niantic, the company that developed and publishes the game. What is the purpose of Pokemon Go? The purpose of Pokemon Go is turning on your camera, turning on your microphone, walking around your neighborhoods, your cities, even your homes, stores, and so forth, looking at your phone and seeing if there's any Pokemon to capture. But at the same time, you're recording all this data, you're recording everything that's being said, and it's all going back to Niantic, who again was funded by In-Q-Tel. The individual who deserves all the credit on this and broke this out was this individual right here, Lunduk. And yes, the CIA is heavily involved in Pokemon Go, and they were getting all this information that people were collecting right back. You want to know something funny? The CIA actually released a statement. You can see this right here on CIA.gov. Are you at an agency facility? Pokemon No. They go into how you cannot use Pokemon Go at any CIA agency facility. I wonder why, and I wonder why this one specific game. But here's the thing. In-Q-Tel essentially funded John Hanke's Keyhole, which is Google Earth, Google Maps, Street View, and so forth. But you don't think that In-Q-Tel requested any of that data that was captured by players that went to Niantic. People had their cameras on, their cameras up, walking around their homes, all to see if they could see tiny Pokemon on their phone screens, capturing the entire layout of their homes. But like I said, not just their homes, but their neighborhoods, their cities, and so forth. Some people would even get inside their cars, driving around multiple cities, all to capture all 150, if not more, Pokemon. So basically, they got data collectors for free. And what's even more insane, people paid to be data collectors because if you go to the app, there are in-app purchases. And again, this app has made a lot of money. And In-Q-Tel that funded all this, again, was one of the big funders of Palantir. Isn't that just crazy how that all connects? Pokemon! A heart so true, the courage to promise you, you see me and I see you. I'll stop. It was even in the song. You see me and I see you. It was always in the song. It was always there. I'm only joking. The official lyrics are, I'll teach you and you'll teach me. But this really taught me a lot about what games or what to actually download on the App Store. But what else is going on? Oh, did you know that there was a chemical leak in Ohio? Another chemical leak. And if you remember that chemical spill that happened when that train derailed, but yesterday on June 11th, news came out that wind drives chemical leak from Ohio explosives plant into nearby communities. Reading the article, it goes on to say communities were under evacuation Wednesday after a large chemical leak from an explosives plant in southeast Ohio sent hazardous air into nearby areas. Jackson County Emergency Manager Robert, I'm not going to go ahead and pronounce that, said the leak at Austin Powder Company's Red Diamond facility happened about 8:30 a.m. Wednesday. Ohio Department of Environmental Protection officials said no injuries were reported from the leak. The Ohio EPA was quoted as saying, a tank reaction released nitrogen oxide gas into the air, but the release has since stopped. But again, this chemical is still went into the air and spread out to nearby communities. The article continues to say officials said the chemical wafting into the air was nitric oxide. Potential exposure can include irritated eyes, drowsiness, and possible loss of consciousness. The leak on the ground at Red Diamond was nitric acid, but a reaction created a nitric oxide plume that was seen over the region. Wait, hold up. Didn't something like this happen last year too in Georgia, in Atlanta? A chemical plant had exploded and it released this plume of chemicals in the air. Yeah, it did. The article goes on to say around noon, the Vinton County Sheriff's Office evacuated residents in the village of Zaleski, as well as areas along Creek Road, Morgan Road, Infirmary Road, and State Route 677. The evacuation orders were lifted at about 4:30 p.m. But what I find interesting is that I was looking up this story on different social media platforms, and there were people that were saying that they're from Ohio, and they did not know this even happened. They had no clue that a chemical plant had exploded in Ohio and that there were evacuation orders in certain locations. So if you're from Ohio, were you aware of this? So yeah, once again, we had another chemical leak in Ohio. The National Weather Service in Charleston, West Virginia, even had to provide plume updates to emergency managers showing the plume was heading south from the facility. I just hope there wasn't something else in those chemicals. These stories always come off very, very suspicious. But on to other news, we also had this plane crash in India. Over 200 people had lost their lives in this Air India crash, officials say. It did not look like there was any engine fire. No reports of anybody seeing smoke coming from the engine. Did not look like the plane was hard to maneuver in the skies, like it was losing some type of control. It was only up there for just 2 minutes, and then it started to rapidly descend and crash into the ground. But what has come out, there was a passenger who took a video inside the plane, and nothing was working.
AC is not working. Look at everyone. So many people, they are using these magazines. AC is not working at all. And as usual, your TV screens are also not working. Neither this button for calling the cabin crew. Nothing is working. Nothing. Not even the light is working. See, this is what you are providing. And as usual, that is why Air India is considered as one of the worst airlines in the world.
And there's always a group of people or some people in the medical field involved in these major plane crashes. Continue to read the article from the New York Times. It goes on to say, the London-bound Boeing Dreamliner went down moments after takeoff in Ahmedabad, India, with 242 people aboard. What is coming out is that now over 260 people had lost their lives in this crash, but only one person had survived. Can you imagine being the only person, the sole survivor, to survive something like this? The victims included students at a medical college where the plane crashed. The article goes on to say plane crash investigations are incredibly complex and it can take months or even years to identify what went wrong. But video and photos of the Air India crash on Thursday prompted some early thoughts from aviation experts. A widely shared video of the crash showed the plane descending over buildings with its nose pointed upward, an unusual position, said John Cox, a former airline pilot and chief executive of Safety Operations Systems, a consulting firm. He goes on to say that the plane's position looks as if it should be climbing, and in fact it's descending. He said the question is why. So we have aviation experts coming out saying we have no idea, but the plane looked very unusual as it was descending. But there are two things I'm sure people will blame. They'll either say it was pilot skill or it's a Boeing. It's a Boeing plane. I mean, there's nothing more that really needs to be said besides it being a Boeing. The article goes on to say dozens of medical school students in the western Indian state of Gujarat were eating lunch on Thursday when an Air India passenger plane carrying 242 people to London crashed into their dining hall. In the aftermath of the disaster, the ripped tail of the wrecked plane could be seen jutting out of the building. So I thought that these students were on the plane, but actually it crashed into the building that these medical students were in. At least 5 students, their lives were ended in the crash in the city of Ahmedabad, said this individual here, the dean of the BJ Medical College, whose campus is near the end of the runway of the airport. Officials fear that the death toll at the medical campus and its neighboring buildings could be higher. So it was going to crash into this medical campus and crash into the lunch hall, it sounds like. It goes on to say many in India's medical sector were mourning the loss of medical students who one day had hoped to save lives, but instead were caught in tragedy. It's a black day for the Indian medical fraternity, said a doctor for the spokesperson for the Indian Medical Association. That is wild. I thought they were on the plane, these medical students, but no, it crashed into the campus where they were having lunch. But going back to Boeing, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner is supposed to be the best of the best Boeing plane. Matter of fact, reading from this article here, until Thursday, the Dreamliner had never been in a fatal crash, according to a review of accident data maintained by Cirium, an aviation data firm. In a statement, Boeing said that it was aware of the crash on the Air India flight and was working to gather more information. Plane crashes are typically caused by multiple factors that can include things like bird strikes, pilot error, manufacturing defects, and inadequate maintenance. Now that's very interesting, and I'll tell you why. There was a news article that came out back in 2024 that I covered on this channel that had to do with how maintenance workers, they were putting these incorrect parts, older parts meant for shorter travel, on these planes meant for longer travel. They were buying these fake parts. All the major airline companies were doing this. Of course, they came out and said they were unaware these were fake parts, but this saved them a lot of money and they were cutting corners. Now, they were supposed to have stopped this, but all these planes are catching engine fires as of 2025. These fake parts, or these much older parts, were being installed incorrectly because, of course, these parts did not match the planes they were being installed into, but whoever was installing them was putting them on anyway the best way they could. And as of 2025, there are a lot of planes, their engines are catching on fire. For example, reading this article here from Fox News, it goes on to say, the American Airlines flight that caught fire soon after taking off from the Denver International Airport in March had several parts installed incorrectly and fuel leaks, according to a preliminary report released Thursday. The Dallas-bound aircraft had one loose part inside the right engine installed in the wrong direction and fuel leaking from the fitting of another part that was also fastened incorrectly, according to the National Transportation Safety Board. Soon after the plane took off, the crew noticed issues with the right engine, the report said. So I'm thinking, going back to these other news articles, they are still putting fake parts or older parts on these planes and, again, installing them the best way they can to make them fit. So anything to save money, even if it costs a lot of lives. Now, I'm not saying this is what happened here in this Air India crash, but it wouldn't surprise me if it did, especially given the fact that Boeing is known for cutting corners. I mean, they even popped a few whistleblowers so this information would not get out. But people are growing more and more suspicious of this plane crash, even more so that it's come out that it crashed directly into a medical campus. News had just came out that a JetBlue flight at the Boston Logan Airport had skid off the runway.
I want to take you out to Boston right now. Live look, this is a JetBlue plane from Chicago that skidded off the runway at Boston Logan Airport. Thankfully, no reports of any injuries. It looks like you've got the passengers that have come off of that plane. It's still upright, that have been taken off and loaded onto those buses that you see right there, and I would imagine taken to the terminal. But all of this right there on the runway in Boston, JetBlue Flight 312 from O'Hare. And you can see some of the crew there on the ground around the plane right now, still taking a look. And the investigation, of course, continues into what happened here. And there will be more on this throughout the day. And we'll bring you more information this hour as we get it into the newsroom. Breaking news, want to take you out to Boston.
Other people talking about another channel I really like a lot, Moon Henry. He talks about how the celestial events and certain events happening during these times. And this goes hand in hand with the whole Saturn's return. And it's not just here in the United States, but there's chaos all over the world.
It's getting bad, you guys, and not just in LA. Wait till I show you what's happening in other countries. Yeah, other countries are revolting right now the same as the US. So now in LA they are boarding up all their stores. Why now? Well, they must have got some kind of memo for them to go do it now. If you get what I'm saying, because the last 2 nights they left it alone. So as of right now, it's getting really bad in New York, and in Chicago and LA, they stormed the freeway, and all the officers and other people were not even able to stop them. Don't forget, there's tens of thousands of people en route right now to all these different places. Meanwhile, believe it or not, ICE is actually firing up their raids and doing more so and continuing this stuff while the riots are going on. Sorry for the little bit of humor, but I mean, come on now, this is purposeful stuff. Right here we have New York and Chicago, and just in time for the strawberry moon, the very low strawberry moon, we have the Schumann frequency going crazy, making people even act more belligerent than before. If I didn't know any better, I would say maybe they've been tracking celestial events since 2000 BC off the coast of Greece. They found this ancient Antikythera computer, it's called. Again, 2000 BC, they were tracking celestial events. And would you believe me, they did crazy things on these special celestial events. Come on guys, open your eyes. But we'll talk about all that in the next video. It gets pretty deep. Black hole sun, Nibiru, Kachina, Node, you name it, it's crazy. Also has to do with earthquake we saw in LA, Colombia, and the Middle East, you get it. Now here in Ireland, I told you it's happening all over the world. This is some people who are having their house burned down by protesters. Can you guess what kind of people they are? Do you remember the videos I made 2 weeks ago where I was talking about there's something wrong with the human brain? I showed thing after thing after thing after event after event after event. What do you know? To be continued. It's getting bad. I came across something leading me to believe that we haven't seen anything close to the worst yet. Like, we have seen nothing in the grand scheme of what this is really going to be. I'll show you in a minute, and no, you have not seen this yet, because there's a certain detail in here that means a lot. Completely unrelated, though, to everything going on. That in the last video was the California fire that has gone to 4,000 acres. It was also all the military vehicles in LA, and the tank was getting ready for the thing going on in DC. But did you know that ICE is really ramping up their raids, even going to fields and snatching people? And after the raids I showed you last night in the fields this morning, they're now starting to put up flags at work sites. Meanwhile, we have Gavin Newsom urging all people in the United States to stand up. Now, I showed this last night, all the locations that we are actively having things. And some person actually caught these people on camera loading all their stuff and their people into this van right here. This will make a little more sense in a minute.
Hey, I'm just documenting you guys putting all your protest stuff in a van. It's very nice of you. How far did you travel to come to protest today?
That's not really your concern.
Now, really quick, I want you to understand all the preparation that has to go into this. The food, the travel, to be out there for days at a time, and the numbers they're in multiple states. Just remember that, okay? I'm about to show you what I came on here to show you in the first place, but this is that fire that went from 300 acres to 4,000 acres, only 10% contained. I wonder how it got there. Okay, so this right here is not related to anything in this video. I just came across a really cool Craigslist ad. And this ad, monthly salary of 200K. So whoever these humans are, they're going to be needed monthly. Monthly. Literally months at a time. Oh, and by the way, did you know the military is pulling out a whole lot of people from Kuwait and other Middle Eastern places? Wonder why.
That is so true. I feel like we have not seen anything yet. And I go back to those news articles, I believe either the beginning of this year or somewhere towards the end of last year, where Congress, they were getting ready for a mass casualty event to instantly replace 100 or more members of Congress in case all of them were to get wiped out at one time.
World War III update. The protests that are spreading right now are not what they seem. Today I'm going to be sharing perspective that you're absolutely not going to hear anywhere else. Protests are spreading to Atlanta, Chicago, New York City, LA like clockwork, as if on cue, as if being fomented by some centralizing force. Obviously, that narrative is going to be heavily politicized, but I got some perspective that you absolutely are not going to get anywhere else. I guarantee you. Right now, they're talking about deploying the National Guard to these other states that are starting to show some signs of civil unrest. Still relatively small in scope compared to what we were used to in 2020 and even years gone by. These seem like fairly smaller scale disturbances that should not elicit the deployment of the National Guard, but we're going to get to why the government is overreaching in the way they are, and in some cases even leapfrogging the National Guard in violation of posse comitatus, putting actual Marines on the streets. Why would they be going to such an extent? Okay? Now, there's two things to consider here. One is timing. Look at the timing of this. What was about to happen? Ukraine, Russia on the brink of exploding. The Iran war on the brink of starting. All of a sudden, this issue that's been festering for months and months, that has been an ongoing issue. There have been arrests. There have been some notable cases, in fact, that should have compelled people onto the streets. But the question is, why now? Well, there's four primary reasons. One, in which I expounded upon in yesterday's video, or today's video, depending on when you watch this, and it was that they're using civil unrest as a pretense to build out and establish an administrative foothold that will be used to form the basis of civil defense infrastructure in preparation for World War III. They want to get military on the streets because when the shit hits the fan, they're not going to be able to coordinate that after the lights go out. So you have to do it first. Look, if you knew, before you laughed me out of the room, if you knew that the big day was coming, that we're in the penultimate phase of this whole experiment, and the big clash of global superpowers was right on the horizon, you would understand that you would need some sort of militant administrative framework in order to establish some measure of continuity of government after the inevitable happened. You need to have a way to lock people down, okay, when the shit hit the fan. This is not the Cold War. There is not a bunker on every street corner. There is not a hard and fast set of rules and protocols to follow down to the municipal level in terms of how to administrate aid and disaster mitigation as there was during the Cold War. So you need boots on the ground in order to facilitate that. The World War III update. The protests that are spreading right now.
That video comes from News Prep Now, and all this again just feels like one big distraction to multiple different events that are currently going on. But this one big distraction will lead to something much bigger. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, as any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.